All righty. Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Chavez. I'm the Assistant Director for Transfer Services at UC Santa Barbara's Office of Admissions. I use she, her, ella pronouns. Thanks so much for being here today. This is the first of many transfer counselor webinars that we hope to have available for you all throughout this academic year, leading us to ETS later on this year. I am joined by some of my amazing colleagues at UC Santa Barbara. I'll have them introduce themselves in just a second. We are recording the session since we want to post this on our Counselor Resources YouTube playlist. With that said, again, thanks for being here. We have a panel of very amazing individuals, if I do say so myself, that are ready to share a wealth of information, some new information, maybe even some old information, just some refresher info, but we're just really thankful for you to join us. The team at Santa Barbara is really focused on having strong customer service, thanks to the direction of our director, Lisa. So any questions that you might have that is specific to Santa Barbara, or even some system-wide questions, we're always happy to try to field those for you, but we'll always refer you to the experts if we're unable to answer those. So I'm going to hand it over to Adra for her to introduce herself.
Thanks, Melissa. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Adra Bowman. I am a transfer admission counselor, so I specialize in outreach with transfer students. I primarily work with Santa Barbara City College, Moore Park College, and then all of the Bay Area schools. So that is a large area. So I recognize a lot of the counselors who are in here. Thank you all for joining us today, and I look forward to spending some time with you. I'll pass it over to Claire.
Hi, everyone. My name is Claire Nagel, and I am a senior admissions counselor in evaluation. So I primarily deal with the evaluation of applications and student records, and I'll pass it along to Aaron.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Aaron Rivera, and I am the Assistant Director for Evaluation and External Review. So I work with the evaluation staff that goes over and reviews applications.
All right, so my panel of experts, we're going to share a lot of good info for you. Just want you to be aware that we do have a counselor resources webpage on our UCSB admissions site, where you have access to registration information for future webinars, a playlist where we will eventually post this recording. And then specifically, since you all work with transfer students, we do have designated transfer admissions counselors for every single California community college. If you don't know the rep for your college, you can click on the Meet Your Counselor page, and you will have our contact information for you. We're available via Calendly, since we're working primarily remote right now, and eventually we'll make our way over to our office sometime soon here, we hope, if all goes well. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. To make sure we have a good recording, we're going to turn our cameras off. We'll turn our cameras back on when we get to the Q&A portion of the presentation. We have a lot of content to cover. So because we are recording, we will stick to answering questions towards the end of the presentation, since we can't really interact the chat with the recording that we hope to post on YouTube. So thanks so much for your patience on that. Alrighty, so I will actually be kicking us off and covering just a couple of things that I've sort of mentioned, and I've mentioned in a couple of emails that I may have sent out that you may have received. So because there is going to be a big change with ETS, hopefully I'm not ruining a big surprise here, but the Ensuring Transfer Success conferences that were normally scheduled for May of every year are now going to be held in September. So because of that, we wanted to make sure that we had ample opportunity to connect with counselors to kind of talk about things that are relevant to the admissions application process during that particular moment in time, and just some evaluation topics that we think are helpful to either bring up, clarify, or just refresh. So this is our plan. And again, you can find this information on our counselor resources webpage on our admissions site. We have today's webinar, and then the next one will be on March 29th from same time, 12 to 1:30, where we will cover the admission decision timeline and potential decisions that your students could get, and steps that they should follow if they're admitted, not admitted, or waitlisted. So we'll go over all those different things. And then the evaluation that we're going to talk about is language other than English in its many forms, and how it could potentially apply towards transfer admission. And then after that, we'll have a May 10th webinar, same time, 12 to 1:30, and we will update you with any tag changes, so our transfer admission guarantee program, and we'll have an open Q&A. Then we will see you at the Ensuring Transfer Success conferences in September. There is a plan currently for having an in-person component and a virtual component if in-person is, safe. But there's also a plan for having a fully virtual program in case that is, where we're at that point in time, right? Webinar recordings will be posted online on our Counselor Resources YouTube playlist, which is embedded on this Counselor Resources bookmark here. So definitely, if we can get Adria, if you could share that in the chat, that'd be awesome. The link to the Counselor Resources webpage. So getting into the info, all the really, really important things that we want to cover in terms of the application timeline and the topic of the transfer academic update for your students that are current applicants to UC for fall of 2022. So November was the application deadline, and the students have worked hard. They, wrote their personal insight questions. That was their first checkpoint in the application timeline review. Then this month, they should have received updates from all UC campuses that they applied to, asking them to create their admissions portals, and also a generic reminder from UC Office of the President to log in to their UC application and submit that transfer academic update. That transfer academic update is really, really important. Then UC campuses will take the next couple of months to evaluate all of those transfer applications. This year, UCSB received a little short of 18,000 or about 18,000 transfer applications. So it does take us a great deal of time to get through all of that because of, mixed records and international coursework and that kind of stuff. So it takes us a good while. And that's also because we received a very large number of freshman applications, those students that are applying for first year admission. So all of that takes a long time. So we thank you in advance for your patience. Some UC campuses may start releasing admission decisions as early as March. A lot of them will be waiting towards April just because of workload. And in Santa Barbara in particular, we're looking at mid to late April for our transfer admission decision release. And for the, I believe, third, maybe fourth year in a row, we are going with a one-day decision release date. So from now on, I think that's going to be our normal, where we will be releasing our transfer decisions on one date. And there's my little square that says that. Just keeping in mind, again, UC campuses are reviewing a lot of applications, so it really is a time-consuming process. We do try to be as transparent as possible, which is why we kind of wanted to give you an insight, in this whole process, so that you're aware if your students come to you a little stressed or concerned, you can reassure them that, they're still on the right track and they're doing everything that they need to. So for the students that are applying for fall of 22 admission, these are the eligibility requirements that we will initially review for when we receive that transfer academic update. No application is reviewed until we receive that transfer academic update. So in order for students to maintain the UC eligibility, they need to complete the 7-course pattern by the end of spring, and we'll know this by looking at all of their courses that were completed through the fall of 2021 and in progress courses for winter and or spring 2022. So that's how we look and evaluate for those things. They need to have at least 60 semester or 90 quarter units of UC transferable credits by the end of this spring, and a competitive GPA that's calculated with the TAU / by the end of the fall 2021 term. So typically our competitive GPA has been 3.0, 3.2 and above for most years. Last year was our most selective year where we had a little bit more of a higher GPA, but for students, this year we might be looking at some changes just because our applicant pool is a little bit smaller than past years. So there's definitely that to take into consideration. So all students need to meet these requirements in order to maintain their eligibility. In addition, major preparation is required if they applied to any biological science major at UCSB. We have 10 of them. Any of the economics majors, so it's economics and accounting, math majors, physics, and any major in the College of Engineering. So when we receive the application for a regular applicant, we'll review for the 7-course pattern. Does the student have enough units? And then we'll calculate their GPA. And then if they apply to any of these majors, we'll then check for major prep. For those students that submitted a transfer admission guarantee to our campus, we will look for a lot of the same things as for students that are applying just through the regular application process, but we're specifically going to be looking for that 3.4 GPA calculated with that TAU by the end of fall 2021. In addition, those that are tag applicants, they cannot need more than 18 units in the spring in order to reach that minimum unit requirement. So no more than 18 units in the spring to reach 60 semester or 90 quarter. That's one of our tag requirements. And because major preparation is also part of the tag, it's only required for, again, our selective departments. So biological sciences, economics, math, and physics. You'll notice that College of Engineering is not listed here because we don't offer the tag for the College of Engineering at UCSB. So for students that tagged to Santa Barbara in any of the majors on the screen, they will need to have their required major preparation completed by the spring prior to transfer, so spring of 2022, but their GPA will be calculated with that TAU / at the end of fall 2021 grades. A lot of students will often contact us and ask about changes like, Melissa, what if I drop this course for that course? I'm going to drop history 100, but I'm going to add humanities 100. In general, those types of updates are totally fine, and they can submit that with their TAU. There are the only considerations in terms of changing schedule is how would that impact the student's eligibility for the 7-course pattern? So is it an English course? Is it a math course? Is it courses that the student needs to fulfill the rest of the 7-course pattern? Or will dropping a course change the student's unit totals? Or how is this, calculated in a GPA? Those kinds of things, right? So in general, if students are switching one transferable course for another, as long as it's not a repeat, duplication, or limited with anything else, it's typically fine. We're always happy to review those things with the students, but that's something that you can share with them as well. If they're dropping, in general, one transferable course for another, it's typically fine. Make sure they have that updated on the TAU. The admissions portals is the official place where students will actually log in to review their application admission decision. So each campus has emailed your students instructions for how to create their campus-specific admissions portal. They will have the opportunity to use their UC application ID or their campus-specific ID number in order to create their admissions portal. Again, this is where they will review their official decisions. So they must have this done in order to review a decision in April. We are not allowed to share decisions over email, over phone, or anything like that. So they have to create their portal in order to get access to their admission decision. And that's also where they can accept or decline their offer of admission if they are admitted. We do have a tutorial. That's been our new thing this year, is creating a lot of video tutorials for students and counselors alike. We do have an admissions portal tutorial on our YouTube page that you are welcome to watch as well. But that portal tutorial goes into very specific detail on creating the admissions portal, and students will likely have their questions answered by watching that video. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Adra.
Thank you, Melissa. And I just dropped another link in the chat to that portal video, which is part of our transfer resources playlist on our YouTube channel. So if you'd like to check that out, if you haven't seen it before, there are a lot of what we hope are helpful videos for you and your students. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Transfer Academic Update, or TAU. The first thing to be aware of is that all transfer applicants to any UC campus should have received this email. This is a screenshot of part of the email. That email will include the student's UC application ID number, which they also should have gotten upon confirmation of submitting their application back in November. And if this email provides detailed instructions on the TAU, what it is, the deadline to submit it, and all of that. So if you have a student who has not received this email, then they may want to check their spam folder and make sure that they're checking the email address they used to create their UC application with, because this email was sent to every single student. So to access the TAU, students just log into their UC application. The default landing page will be the application status page, and they will be able to see, Thank you, Melissa. I forgot that I wasn't controlling the slides because Melissa was doing it so seamlessly with me. Melissa's controlling them. So if the student has not yet submitted their first or initial TAU, they will see this red exclamation mark next to the transfer academic update, and it will say not submitted. Now, only one TAU is required of all students. The priority deadline is, of course, January 31st, but a lot of students don't realize that they can actually submit additional or multiple TAUs throughout March. So only TAUs that are submitted by January 31st are 100% guaranteed to be included in the evaluation at every campus. However, additional TAUs submitted after January 31st may be included in the review depending on the campus. So that priority deadline, January 31st, there are a couple of different things students can change or update in their application, and some things that they cannot change or update. So you can see from the screenshot that it is a step-by-step process. The biggest thing that we need the biggest reason we have the TAU and that we need students to update is their fall 2021 grades. So they should all be listed as IP in progress from when the student submitted the application in November. The TAU deadline of January 31st is an opportunity for students to change those grades from IP to whatever grade they received and is currently reflected on their transcript. They can also update their winter and or spring planned courses and colleges and grades. They can change those from planned to IP in progress. Again, winter courses are not required of students. So some schools are on the quarter system. Some schools have a winter intersession, so that is optional. Most students will just be updating their spring 2022 courses. And then the other thing that students can update besides their fall 2021 grades and winter spring 2022 courses is the additional comments, in which place they can explain if there are any other grade changes or other information that is relevant to the review of their application. For example, a big reason we see the additional comments being used is if students have any grade changes prior to fall 2021, perhaps a student was in the process of applying for academic renewal or an excused withdrawal or something like that. We always tell students when they submit the application in November, they have to put their current and accurate grades that are currently on their transcript. So if there are changes between November and January 31st to prior to fall 2021, there's no way to change those courses or grades on the application, but a student can explain those in the additional comments. And then one of two things will happen when we are reviewing that application. We'll read the additional comment, that always happens. If there is enough information in the additional comment for us to make that change manually, for example, if it's one course, that was a grade change from an F to an EW, we could take the student's word for it. We could just manually make that change. However, I would say probably in most cases, we may email the student and request proof of that grade change or of that additional information they provided by way of an unofficial transcript, a screenshot, or a PDF of their current transcript and grades. So it's really important that students monitor their email addresses that they use to submit the UC application for any possible request. And as I mentioned, additional TAUs are allowed until the end of March, but they are not guaranteed to be included in the evaluation. So what that means is because we have, every campus has thousands of applications that they are reviewing starting in January for students who submit their TAUs early, all the way through March and even into April. If we happen to pull a student's application for review in February and they submitted their TAU and we evaluate them and we make an admission decision, and then after we make a decision, that student submits another TAU, we do get a notification that there has been an additional TAU, but it is a campus by campus decision whether to then go and re-review that student and see the change that they've made and decide whether to incorporate it into the review if it might possibly change their decision. So at UCSB, we do go back and look at additional TAUs and we make changes if necessary, but not every campus might do that. So something to be aware of. So students can definitely submit additional TAUs after January 31st, but only those submitted by January 31st are guaranteed to be included in the evaluation. It will also say here on the transfer academic update page that if students are not taking any courses in the winter or spring, they still have to submit a TAU. I have seen students who aren't taking any courses at all in fall, winter, or spring. They're taking a whole gap year, so they won't have any changes to report. However, they still need to submit the TAU and say, I have no changes to report, which will then trigger the campuses to be able to review that application. But if we see an application that does not have a TAU submitted by January 31st, then it's possible that student might not be reviewed, they might not be admitted. A couple additional notes about the TAU. So in addition to those grades and courses and additional comments, students can also update their colleges. So say they are taking a class at a new college in spring 2022, they can go ahead and add that new college. They can edit the dates of attendance. Sometimes when students submit the application in November, they don't realize that they're supposed to report planned courses for spring 2022. So they say that their end date of attendance was fall 2021, and then they go to submit the TAU and they're not able to add spring 2022 courses. And that's because the application doesn't think that they're attending school during that term. So they have to go back and change the date of attendance at the college before they can then add those courses. Students can also adjust whether they are planning to earn a degree or a diploma, which is not required to transfer. It's not an admission requirement for any UC campus, but many students do earn a degree or diploma or more than one and wish to report those. And then if, again, a student is not enrolled during winter or spring, they will then have to explain why they're not taking any courses. And that explanation does not have to be extremely detailed. It can be as simple as, I've fulfilled all of my requirements to transfer by the end of fall 2021, so I'm not taking any courses in spring. And that's sufficient. We just ask for the gap in education to ensure that the student is reporting their full and accurate academic history, but it is okay to have a gap. At UCSB, it's even okay to have a gap in education during that last term for tag applicants. So we do not require that tag applicants are enrolled full-time in the term immediately prior to transfer. Another part of the transfer academic update is just confirmation that the student will complete the minimum requirements to transfer. So that includes the entry-level writing requirement, which all transfer students will answer yes to because they have their 2 English courses. We'll also ask them if they're planning to complete IGETC, which again is not required for admission. So students may be checking in with you to see if they're on track to complete IGETC or not. And UCSB, by the way, does accept partial and full IGETC. And then we'll also ask them to confirm their 7-course pattern requirements, so the English and math in particular. And they will have to, manually enter those, which we do look at. When we're reviewing applications, we primarily look at the courses, and grades reported in the academic history section of the application. But if there is any confusion or any issues with that, then we may also check the student's TAU to see what they self-reported as their English and math courses. So for example, if a student had an AP English exam and they did not report it in the exam scores section of the application, but they did report it here in the TAU, that would then prompt us to ask the student, did you take this AP exam, and make sure that they meet that requirement. And then last slide on the TAU here, just another reminder, campuses cannot evaluate a student's application if they do not submit the TAU, because we don't have the accurate information. So if a student never submits a TAU, not by January 31st, not even by March, that student is not going to get admitted because there's not an accurate information for the campuses to review them. So it's critical that all students submit the TAU. Now, if a student misses the January 31st deadline, they can still, again, submit TAUs after that deadline. Some campuses, UCSB included, will remind students about the TAU. So we may send 1, 2, or sometimes even 3 emails throughout February and March reminding a student to submit that TAU. However, other campuses, particularly some campuses that are maybe more selective at the transfer level with lower admission rates, if they pull an application after January 31st to review it and it does not have a TAU, they might just deny that student and move on to the next one. They might not take the time to remind the student, wait a couple days, see if they respond. So it's really critical that all students submit that TAU by January 31st or as soon as possible thereafter if they miss that deadline. And then if you have a student who has made a mistake or has, additional changes that they want to make, again, after that January 31st deadline, they should always just submit another TAU. The TAUs do not replace the information from the prior one. We can see kind of a list of all the separate TAUs that were submitted. So we can actually review each TAU kind of additive in addition to the previous ones. So during the application review period, which can start as early as January for students who submit a TAU early, but primarily is during February through April, we are reviewing all of those applications. Can you click on the next bullet, Melissa? Thank you. And as I briefly mentioned this earlier, but if we need more information from students, which may be prompted by the additional comments. It may be prompted by things like a history or a pattern of repeated courses or academic renewal. We may email students. There is a 5-day response time for students to respond to that request for information. A couple of things to know about this. For the most part, students may not realize which campus has emailed them. We all share some applications we share in the review with other campuses. So a student may just get an email from UC Admissions Review and not know exactly which campus it is. Sometimes campuses will identify which campus it is. Sometimes it will just say, UC Admissions Review. A student has 5 days to respond. If they are unable to procure the transcript or whatever information was requested within those 5 days, it's really critical that the student still respond to the email and say, I got this email, I'm working on getting this information to you. And then they can respond again once they have that information. So it's not necessarily that the student needs to, procure all of the documents if we ask for documents within that 5 days, if that's not possible. But they do need to give us some sort of response so that we know they saw that email within 5 days, particularly as we get closer to the end of the application review period in March and April. If we don't receive information from students that we request, that could be grounds for denial of admission. So if we request a transcript to verify a grade and we never get a response, then we cannot verify that grade, and that may affect a student's admission decision. Now, if students have questions for a particular campus, they should, in most cases, email the campus with the student's UC application ID number or with that UC campus's unique ID number, so that they can be identified, and they can contact the admissions office of each campus individually. Some campuses may also have a way for students to contact them through their admissions portal. So I believe at UCI, they prefer that students, contact them through the portal. So each campus has different ways that students can get in contact with them, but email is usually pretty reliable. And final slide here, as we transition from the TAU into our evaluation portion. So shortly, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Claire. I wanted to introduce this topic of limitations. So every transfer application, hopefully you've gotten this sense already, is carefully evaluated by UC admissions staff to accurately apply UC transfer policies. So as you all are probably aware, we have certain rules and policies that we need to follow as UC campuses that don't always align with the way that the community colleges and other colleges calculate units and GPA and things like that. So we're talking about limitations today, and we obviously don't expect you to, carefully review every student's application and do the same kind of process that we would do during our review. It is time consuming, but there are certain circumstances where students you may be working with are at higher risk of not meeting the minimum eligibility requirements. So one of those circumstances is when you have a student who is on track to complete the minimum unit requirement. So between 60 to maybe up to 64 semester units or 90 to 95 quarter units. If you're looking at a student's application or a student's transcript and they have that minimum number of units planned through the spring, we recommend you help them check their courses more carefully than you might do with a student with more units to make sure that there are no limitations or other issues that might affect their overall unit count. So assist.org has all that information available. We just find that a lot of students don't take the time to look up their courses on assist to see if there are any limitations. So not every student necessarily needs to do this, but if they're on track to meet the minimum unit requirement, it is a really good idea. Another case might be a student who has a lot of PE credit units, so like an athlete, or a student who has a lot of coursework from non-California community colleges. So with that, I'm going to transfer it over to Claire to talk in a lot more detail about limitations and how some common ones that we see with our transfer applicants.
Thank you, Adra. So we're going to go over some of the most common limitation issues we see that prevent students from being UC eligible. So it's important for students to be aware that these limitations are applied across all colleges attended. So coursework at one college may be limited with coursework at another. So first is PE. They're limited to 4 semester or 6 quarter units of activity courses and 8 semester or 12 quarter units of theory. This is most commonly an issue for students who participate in athletics at the community college level. So it's important for them to be aware of how many of those PE units they're relying on to meet the minimum. For pre-calculus and college algebra, there's a maximum of 5 semester or 7.5 quarter units. Typically at a CCC, they can be combined, pre-calculus and college algebra, for a total of 5 semester or 7.5 quarter units, unless it is otherwise listed on assist. So some colleges do have a limitation of one or the other, but typically they can use both to meet that maximum of 5 semester units. For statistics, they're limited to 1 course of elementary or introductory statistics. For counseling, college success, or personal development type courses, they're limited to 3 semester or 4.5 quarter units, and they can actually, in most cases, use multiple courses to meet that minimum, as long as it's not listed otherwise on assist. For ESL, there is an 8 semester or 12 quarter unit maximum, but some community colleges do have additional limitations that supersede that unit limit. And we do have an example later on a different slide of what that will look like. For physics, we usually advise students not to mix and match physics courses because they're limited to 1 series. So if they took General Physics 1 and then Physics for Engineers 3, they're likely to not receive all the units that they completed because there will be some duplication of topics. Typically, these series are not straight across where General Physics 1 is equal to Physics for Engineers 1. So if they're mixing and matching between different series, they will probably have a different number of units allowed just because of the duplication of topics. And then also administration of justice. There are limitations on certain topics that we would see on assist. So many administration of justice courses are transferable, but they're also heavily limited. So it's just really important if they're taking a lot of administration of justice courses, or if they're really relying on those to meet the minimum, they need to check assist very carefully to make sure that they know exactly how many of those units will be transferable. So this is just an example of some common, what we usually see for PE units. So the majority of PE or kinesiology courses are considered activity units, so they're limited to 4 semester units. So typically students don't max out on theory courses because they're limited at 8 semester units, but we do very commonly see students take much more than 4 semester units of activity courses, and sometimes they do ultimately fall short as a result of that limitation. So next is the limitation on pre-calculus and college algebra. So this is the most typical kind of scenario that we see where the courses can be combined for a total of 5 semester or 7.5 quarter units. It is important though that students double check assist for their own community college to make sure that it's not limited to only 1 course, but usually you can combine to get that maximum 5 semester units. Okay. Next up in math is statistics. So the limitation on statistics courses applies across departments. So as we see here, an elementary stats course in the math department will also be limited with statistics courses in psychology, sociology, etc. For counseling or personal development courses, so this example just shows the stated minimum of or maximum of 3 semester units, and students can take multiple courses to meet that maximum number. But if the course is already 3 semester units, they've already met it, but they could take multiple 1 unit courses to meet that maximum 3 units. Next, we're looking at ESL. So in this case, we have that 8 semester maximum unit limit, as well as additional limitations on specific courses. So ESL 123 and 132 are limited with one another, and then ESL 134 and 135 are limited with one another. So it's very important for students to be aware that there's that additional limitation on top of the maximum 8 semester units. For physics, this is very common that you would see it listed this way, that all physics series are limited with one another. So if a student has taken courses from different series, we would give preference to the complete series if they have one. Otherwise, we'll go check course descriptions and deduct credit for duplication of topics. This is kind of a big one. It's a really good example of there being a lot of transferable administration of justice courses, and students might miss that they can only receive credit for 3 total. They have to look really carefully. So there are cases where a student takes multiple courses in one area of administration of justice, and those end up being limited with one another. So where they think they might have credit for 3 courses, they actually only have credit for 1. So it's very important here, if they're using a lot of administration of justice courses to meet the minimum unit requirement, they need to know exactly which ones are limited with one another. Okay, and then for coursework from non-California community colleges, it's pretty similar to what we see for the community colleges on Assist, but there are a few differences. So in English, they're only allowed to have 1 first UCE or 1A course, which is the same as we see for community colleges. The minimum is 3 semester or 4 quarter units in order for it to be considered UCE. The problem is sometimes they're not quite certain whether that English course would be considered a 1A or a 1B course. And we always recommend that if there's any doubt about it, they should take an extra 1B. So if they take, or if they took a 1A course at another college and then took a 1A course at community college, those courses would be limited with one another. And if that's all they have, they're not going to meet UCE. So since they can only have 1A course, they can have multiple 1B courses. So it's usually better for them to sort of round out their application by taking that extra 1B, just to make sure that they have 2 transferable English courses. Okay. For ESL, it's the same maximum number of 8 semester or 12 quarter units, but it's important to remember that not all ESL courses will be transferable. We only take the highest levels with a writing emphasis. And none of these can be used as UCE, but there are some composition courses at 4-year schools that are geared towards international students or English language learners that could be acceptable for UCE. So that's typically, if you look at their course catalog and they're limited to or considered equivalent to their regular English composition courses, then those ones could be considered UCE. For college success, this time it's only 1 course with a maximum of 3 semester or 4.5 quarter units, so they cannot have multiple courses come together to meet that maximum 3 semester units from any school other than a California community college. And we do see sometimes some 4-year schools require a full year of college success. Usually it's a freshman or first year seminar, but credit will only be awarded for 1 of those courses. For math, it's important to remember that not all pre-calculus, college algebra, or lower division statistics courses will be transferable. So students need to make sure that their course has an intermediate algebra prerequisite in order for it to be transferable and to meet UCM. So for 4 years and out-of-state schools, pre-calculus and college algebra are an either-or scenario. So this is different from what we see for community colleges. So in this case, 2 pre-calculus courses could be used together to meet the 5 semester units, but a pre-calculus and a college algebra course would not be combined. They would only get one or the other. And while we do accept up to 5 semester or 7.5 quarter units for 2 pre-calculus courses, neither of those courses can be exclusively trigonometry content. So pre-calculus usually contains some trigonometry, but a pure trigonometry course is not transferable and will not meet UCM. Okay. Regarding calculus, some schools offer multiple calculus series. So this could be business calculus, calculus for social science, calculus for engineers, etc. Students will only receive credit for 1 calculus series. Statistics courses, as I said earlier, also have an intermediate algebra prerequisite, and it will be limited to 1 lower division course, which like we've seen for community colleges, they can be from different departments, math, psychology, business, etc. Let's see. And for administration of justice, again, it's a maximum of 3 administration of justice courses in those 3 specific areas. So they can have 1 introductory course, 1 law and society course, and 1 criminal justice system course. So best case scenario, they could have a total of 3 courses. And we often get the question about how are limitations applied. And limitations are applied in the way that is of greatest benefit to the student. So if we're looking at the application and we see that reaching the 60 semester or 90 quarter unit minimum for eligibility is a concern, the limit will be applied to maximize the number of units used to meet the requirement. So for example, if an applicant took a 5-unit calculus 1 course and a 3-unit business calculus course, we'll award the 5-unit course and limit the 3-unit course in order to help them meet that minimum 60 semester unit count. If the applicant will meet the unit requirement either way, the limit will be applied to maximize the transferable GPA. So for example, if an applicant got a C in a 5-unit course and an A in a 3-unit course that are limited with one another, we would award credit for the course they got an A in to help boost that GPA since they don't need the extra units to meet the minimum. And lastly, if a limitation applies to a course that's needed for major preparation for their selective major and a non-major prep course, the limit will be applied to allow the course that is required for major preparation. So the example is if an applicant applied to math and has both calculus 1 and business calc, we would award calculus 1 and limit business calc so that they meet eligibility for that major. Okay. And so that's it. I'm going to pass it back to Adra for sequencing.
Yes, I was the one who was like, we should talk about sequencing. So I get to talk about it. So sequencing is a very related issue to limitations, but it's not big enough to encounter, warrant a whole webinar just about it. So I want to talk briefly about sequencing. Very similar to the notes you'll see on assist for limitations, there may also be notes about sequencing. So one in particular is that introductory courses typically have to be taken before the full, official series. So in particular for biology, chemistry, and economics, which the economics is more common at 4-year universities, but biology and chemistry we see quite often at the California community colleges. So you may have, like a principles of biology course or an introductory chemistry course. And usually there's a note on assist saying, if a student takes that introductory course after they take biology 101 or chem 101 or whatever the full biology, chemistry, economics series for majors in those, for students in those majors is, then they will not get credit for it. So that's another thing that could affect a student's overall unit count if they take the biology series and then after that they take the introductory biology course. They won't get units for that, and that could affect their bottom line. Some other common courses that have to be taken in sequential order besides the introductory course before a series include biology and chemistry courses in the series. So typically there's 1 and 2, or sometimes 1, 2, and 3, or even 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the case of physics. And often there will be notes on assist saying they have to be taken in sequence. So again, we only apply those limitations for sequencing if there are notes on assist. So if there's no note on assist about the order a series has to be taken in, then that's fine. A student can take them out of order. But if there is a note, then we will follow that during our review process. Language other than English as well. Specifically, I'm talking about a student's high school language of instruction. So if you have a student who has taken language other than English and they did not attend high school in the United States, then it's worth checking what language did that student take high school in 9th grade or higher. So even if it was just 9th grade in another language, then we will not give credit for lower division coursework in that same language. So for example, if a student went to high school in Colombia and their language of instruction was Spanish, and then they come to the US and try to take Spanish, any lower division Spanish course at the community college, we will not give credit for that. And that does actually happen more often than you would think. So again, it's not a concern if a student's high school language of instruction was English for all 4 years, but if it was not, then that's something to be aware of. And then also with math, in particular with college algebra, pre-calculus, and calculus 1 and 2. Those are the courses that typically have to be taken in sequence. By that, we mean pre-calculus, college algebra first, and then Calc 1 and then Calc 2. So if a student takes calculus 1 and 2 and then takes pre-calculus or college algebra after that, they're not going to get credit for that college algebra or pre-calculus course. So on assist, the notes you'll see on the transferable course agreements don't necessarily differentiate between limitations and sequencing, although they will say, limited to or no credit because if taken after this course. So don't worry so much about the terminology of whether something is a sequence issue or a limitation issue. Basically, the bottom line is, if you have a student that you want to double check they will meet UC eligibility, you should look up each course they've taken on assist and also be aware of their high school level of English, and then look for any notes on assist and follow those. All right.
All right.
Back to you, Melissa.
Yes, sure. Thank you, everyone, Claire and Adra, for all of that info. Just wanted to open it up for questions now. I did want to share a couple of key things. So we do have a great resource at UCOP. Laura and team, they answer all the system-wide questions. So as a reminder, you can always send any system-wide questions to them, askuc@ucop.edu. And for those of you that are interested in visiting the UC Santa Barbara campus, we are tentatively and very hopeful in planning our open house that will be taking place on Saturday, April 9th. We're looking primarily to host an all outdoors open house, to try to have an opportunity for students, parents, counselors to visit our campus, get to know us. So just letting you all know, but of course, if anything changes, we will update you via email. Alrighty, any questions? You can type them into the chat box. I'm going to leave this resource slide up here as we answer any questions that you may have. We're getting close to the 1 o'clock hour. We'll be available till 1:30 in case you have any more questions, but please go ahead and type them into the chat box, and we can answer those for you. And Erin and Claire, if you wouldn't mind answering them aloud, that would be awesome. I know we have our director, Lisa Prescott, and our associate director, Donna Coyne, in the house. So welcome to them. They're happy to pitch in here if they would like to as well.
And I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording just so everyone's aware. Stopping the recording.